After the terror of transatlantic ships during World War I, German U-boats became even more formidable during World War II. The most formidable naval weapon in both world wars, German submarines devastated transatlantic shipping, sinking 8,000 merchant and warships and killing tens of thousands of people. These submarines plied the oceans in search of prey and could attack ships 20 times their size, both from above and below with their deck guns and torpedoes. Inside the dimly lit, claustrophobic submarines, sailors couldn't shower or even change during a patrol that could last 2 months at sea. 50 men shared 2 toilets, one of which was used as a food locker at the beginning of the patrol, which could not function at a depth of 80 feet or more due to external water pressure, according to Douglas Boddings, the U-boats. Submarine crews inhale a disgusting cocktail of bilge water, sweat, and diesel fumes. Mold had blossomed on their boots, and the cards had even rotted from the oppressive heat and dampness. I feel like Jonah inside some huge mollusk whose vulnerable parts are covered with armor, wrote German war correspondent Lothar Gunther Buchheim during a patrol in 1941. Submarines were still a primitive naval weapon when Germany became the last major naval power to build them in 1906. However, by the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, Germany had withstood the competition. Its 20 combat-ready submarines were more advanced than those of other countries and could travel 5,000 miles without refueling, allowing them to operate along the entire British coast. The U-boat fleet made its first strike on 5 September 1914, attacking a British light cruiser off the coast of Scotland, killing over 250 sailors. 17 days later, U-9 sank 3 British battle cruisers in an hour, killing about 1,500 people. Despite these strikes, in the first month of the war, the Germans lost more U-boats than they sank. In February 1915, Germany announced the start of an unrestricted submarine war in which all ships, even merchant ships from neutral countries, would be sunk without warning in the war zone around Great Britain. The idea of U-boats attacking merchant shipping was dismissed by many British people, including First Lord of the Admiralty Winston Churchill, who wrote, "I don't believe it will ever be done by a civilized power." Submarines attacked not only food and oil bound for the British Isles, but also passenger ships. On May 7, 1915, a U-20 torpedoed the Lusitania off the coast of Ireland, killing about 1,200 passengers, including 128 Americans. Alarmed by the prospect of America entering the war, Germany eventually pledged to protect the safety of passengers before sinking unarmed ships. The Allies struggled to counter the U-boat threat. The Royal Navy camouflaged warships with paint to pose as merchant ships and piled up haystacks to hide the guns. Some British patrols even carried canvas bags and hammers with them, with which they could close and smash the lenses of U-boat periscopes. After the announcement of the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare against Allied and neutral ships on January 31, 1917, submarines sank over 500 ships by the end of April. The U-boats nearly succeeded in defeating Britain, but attacks on American merchant ships were instrumental in bringing the United States into the war. The submarine has arrived in American waters. Germany's development of the U-cruiser submarine allowed her to strike the Atlantic coast of her new adversary. The first German submarine arrived in American waters in May 1918 and sank 13 ships, including 6 in one day, as well as laying mines in American ports and cutting 2 telegraph cables on the seabed while on a 12,000-mile patrol. By grouping merchant ships into convoys and escorting them with warships, Allied countermeasures began to blunt U-boats, although by the time World War I ended, German U-boats had managed to destroy over 10 million tons of cargo. Although the subsequent Treaty of Versailles required the surrender of all submarines and forbade their future possession by Germany, submarine construction resumed after Nazi leader Adolf Hitler abandoned the peace pact in 1935. World War I demonstrated that long-range submarines could be powerful weapons, and when the war returned in 1939, so did the submarines. Submarines target sea lanes during World War II. When World War II began, Germany had 57 U-boats under the command of Commodore Karl Dönitz, who served in U-boats during World War I. Dönitz believed that the outcome of the war would be decided in the Atlantic, and that he could win it with 300 U-boats. In May 1940, Hitler approved unrestricted submarine warfare on all ships around the UK after initially rejecting the idea so as not to provoke the United States. Having seized ports in Norway and western France, Germany extended the range of its submarines to interfere with merchant shipping. The U-boats tracked their targets for several days and attacked in groups that the British called wolf packs. From the summer of 1940 to the spring of 1941, each U-boat at sea sank an average of 8 merchant ships per month during what was known in Germany as Happy Time. Although the British introduced the convoy system early in the war, it was poorly defended for the first 18 months. The radar remained primitive. Aircraft were few and far between and could not provide cover at night. While the Allies did not have adequate information about the movement of submarines, Germany intercepted telegrams between American insurance companies and European insurers to learn about ships' cargoes, sailing dates, and destinations. After the United States entered World War II, a wave of 16 submarines attacked merchant shipping along the American and Canadian coastlines as part of Operation Drumbeat. Taking advantage of the weak and disorganized defenses, submarines in the first half of 1942 reached the Gulf of Mexico and cruised along the coastal sea lanes. Submarines lurking along the North Carolina shipping lanes sank 78 merchant ships and killed 1,200 merchant marines. As soon as American merchant ships began to travel in transatlantic convoys with a constant sea and air escort, the number of attacks dropped sharply. Along with breaking submarine ciphers, improving radar technology, and increasing the effectiveness of attacks by long-range bombers and escort aircraft carriers, 41 submarines were sunk in May 1943, including 8 in one day. In response, Dönitz ordered his U-boats to retreat to more distant locations such as the Indian Ocean, where targets would not be escorted. U-boats returned to the British coast in 1944 after the development of snorkel vent tubes allowed them to operate longer and deeper underwater to reduce the chance of detection by radar and enemy aircraft. However, they suffered heavy losses and few successes. After Hitler's suicide on April 30, 1945, Dönitz succeeded him and ordered the German forces to cease operations and surrender. 45 submarines surfaced at sea and proceeded to the ports indicated by the Allies. By some estimates, Germany lost 3/4 of the submarines built during World War II. Although they ravaged Allied shipping during the 2 world wars, submarines also became steel coffins on the ocean floor for some 30,000 of the 40,000 sailors who served them.